Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining today for it's only the second episode of the Think Editorial podcast. Today's expert is a really good friend of mine that actually I think it'll be a great conversation because we've done some work together in the past. So probably it'll be a lot more back and forth and a lot more friendly and probably a lot more open than what you're used to seeing. And her name is Georgina. She's absolutely wonderful. She is the founder of an agency called Personally, and they focus on personal branding, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today for experts across all different types of sectors. So that means we're going to most likely touch upon one of the continuously forever, I don't know when it will ever stop, hot topics of what's good and what's not on LinkedIn and a bunch of other things, especially what you saw as, let's say, the sneak peek title of this session, which is talking about making personal branding a company-wide strategy. So welcome, Georgina, and thank you very much
Thank
for
you so much.
joining.
Thank you very much for having me. Super excited. It's such a pleasure to be here. I spoke to you, what was it, 2 years ago when you had the idea to start this. So it's amazing to
Yeah.
see what it's become, and then I'm here live on air.
There are some things that we want to go through because we realize that we're kind of facing similar challenges, let's say. And so I think it'll just be a really open brainstorm across not a too wide array of topics, but a good amount of them. So I want to start because I just want to get it over with, really. To be completely honest, for anybody that knows me. But I want to start with probably my one of my least favorite subjects on the planet at the moment, but it continues to haunt us both wherever we go, and that is artificial intelligence. So tell me a little bit about what your experience has been with everything that's going on with AI recently, especially because I believe you have a story that you want to tell us about something that happened recently, and I wanna make sure
I
that
do.
everybody understands what
Yeah,
what we're up against on our end, let's say.
yeah. Well, disclaimer, I hope that nobody experiences the same kind of story that I'm about to tell. I work in personal branding. So the basis of what I do is to help individuals express themselves, um, uniquely. And it's a question I get asked daily if we're talking about creating content is why can't AI do that for me? Which has become, I think I've sort of developed a way to sort of put that behind me and not think about it when someone says it. But recently, it touched a different nerve. I work for a number of clients in different industries, and someone had sent one of my clients on LinkedIn in their DMs a Loom video of them using their own software to reveal that they believe that his content was being written by ChatGPT, which isn't the case because I had a team of ghostwriters um, who are all very, very, very talented and would never go anywhere near it to write content. It's a topic that I hear come up quite often, but I don't feel threatened by it anymore because I've realized that we're in a landscape dominated by so much empty content. I feel it's my responsibility now to help people create authentic, authoritative content that is different, to safeguard real thought leadership and realness online. I think there's so much more that we can do, and I feel like there's a lot of internet culture that is diluting, suppressing the uniqueness or the way that we're using specific formats, and it's such a shame
Hmm.
because when you see that the more distinct something is, the more it, it touches people and the more it engages people. So I'm trying to, yeah, no, I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to encourage people to be different, let your voice be heard, do it in a different way.
When people talk to me about AI, they say, "Ah, yeah, but you as a human being, you don't create anything, net new either. You have inputs and, things influence you, and then you create something." And so when we talk to clients, to thought leaders, to our executives, to whoever it might be, I feel like maybe that narrative sometimes trickles into the conversations that we're having because it's what they hear outside and they come to me with this argument. And they say, yeah, okay, but you tell me to create something new. But at the end of the day, is it really new? Or is it really unique? Or like, what does unique mean? What does distinct mean? What does different mean? Then I have to go into like this entire, conversation about, okay, human behavior and the fact that you are different no matter what. Even if you talk about something that is similar, you will talk about it in a different way. You will do it in a different way. There are very specific aspects of you that nobody else can claim. That's what we need to focus on. It's not about, that the concept needs to be net new. No, it just needs to be something that you've newly created.
I have similar situations, and it's in a different context, but um, most of the conversations I have with founders, to be specific, is that they have the feeling that they don't have something new to say. And I try and explain, it's as simple as the story of you, of how you launch your business is going to be different than any other story out there. Of course, it's different. So I feel like that narrative that's playing of too much, there's too much out there, there's too much content, there are too many stories, there are too many people doing the same thing. It shouldn't apply. Everyone is different. Everyone has a unique experience, or if you put two people in a room and you sit them down for a presentation, they'll tell you two different things through the lens of who they are and what they've experienced in the past, what they've learned, what they haven't learned. So no, I completely agree. And I think that's something that we need to stimulate in people. And it's becoming more difficult because of the culture that is out there of, the internet is too full, or, um, you know, it's been said before.
Mm. Yeah, I see. Then we answer things like it's been said poorly and the internet is full of crap. Therefore, let's say it better and fill it with better things. You can't keep circling the same argument over and over again. And I think that maybe for those that are watching this, that maybe are part of large organizations and they feel they have to work with certain, executives or with certain thought leaders. Honestly, I would just draw a line. At one point, you tried to explain it, but if they can't play ball the way the organization or you as the comms leader or whoever it might be have decided, then at one point, sometimes it's better to drop them, focus on others, get them to be very successful, and then you'll see how the others want to join in. Because otherwise, I'm just stuck in this loop. How do you get over that? For example, you just
Yeah.
mentioned the thing with the with the fact that people feel like they don't have anything new to say. There is some fear also in speaking out publicly about what you think, which I think we all share really at some point. It's not like you and I are immune to this, even
No.
for our own personal brands. But how do you help them get over that fear or feel like they really do have something valuable to say?
Yeah, what you just said. You hit the nail on the head, because there are some people that, and I'll be honest about that, that in the past that I've said, I think it's better that we don't work together, because you have to have you have to be open to a certain degree, and you have to be willing to put in the work. And quite often we have conversations with people about intention, and I can I can figure out quite quickly within sort of half an hour of speaking to someone, um, why they want to build their personal brand, and the drive behind it, and what they want to achieve with it. That I can see that we can do something with that. And there are other people that I've spoken to that, it's more of a sort of empty leads discussion. Like I just want more clients, but they aren't connected to that story and the intent of sharing that story. So yeah, so I've also drawn the line in a few
Hmm.
conversations. But I think I would say 9 out of the 10 clients that I have, um, they have all had an issue with the first month that we've worked together. It's difficult, it's hard to put yourself out there. Pressing post is, I'm the one that presses post, but you know, they're still messaging me the morning of saying, "Are you sure?" is And most of the time, there's nothing in the post other than, it's a sort of introduction, or something really, really basic. The way that I try and take away those fears is, from the beginning, I create I call it a content framework. So based off of the strategy and the plan that we develop for someone, we develop a content framework, which gives them an idea of sort of a content roadmap for around 3 months. So they can have an idea of the sort of narrative. It's only content ideas, so I don't write all the posts, but how we're going to introduce a certain narrative and not jump straight in the deep end. So I would never
Mm.
work with a client and, from day one to day two, go from a post that introduces them and who they are and what they do. And then the second post is a theoretical carousel about something, really, uh, really intensive and deep. It helps give them the confidence that they can see where they're headed. And it also helps me from the beginning. If they say, if, for example, I was working with a client and they're in the impact space and there was something in the news quite at the beginning of our working relationship, and I really wanted to her to say something about it online because she'd sent it to me and said, I feel this and this and this about this article, it's in the news, and we ended up not posting it, um purely
Mm.
because it was too soon in the, for her it was the first time she would have ever have said something like that online. You have to warm up to that moment. And that creating that content framework gives them an idea of when that's going to happen.
Now we're talking a little bit more about, your process, let's say, the
Yeah.
process that you go through when you build an expert's personal brand. But um, how do you deal with the balance between the person and the company, let's say? Because I always find it kind of ironic that we as comms professionals are the ones that are teaching everybody about how to communicate when if you go on LinkedIn and you follow the comms leaders of organizations, what you'll end up finding is that you really can't find out a lot about them. And I would know because they're my target audience. So I would know. You can't find out a lot about them because they only post the stuff from their own company and they rarely say like anything they think. I mean, for those of us that are consultants, where the value of building a personal brand is absolutely clear, we do. We speak about a multitude of things. But I always find that it should be way more similar with those that are inside of organizations, and you don't really see that. So I can't help but draw a parallel also to the executives that we're working with.
I think that a lot of time the strategies that I've seen that have been created in a house, sometimes they come across more as like a checklist of things that execs and people under the execs, sometimes their teams, need to do rather than an actionable plan that empowers someone. I think a lot of the time, documentation and strategies, they end up being sort of documents that people put in a drawer and forget. And then they go back into the cycle of, oh yeah, we've got a new client, oh, this is our new product, and this is the product description. Instead of creating a plan that empowers people to find their voice, to own their voice, and um, to include that process in their day to day. So the sort of extraction of ideas and perspectives, and oh, I had that call with that client, and they said this, and that was a challenge for me. Writing that down and putting it somewhere. Um, Quite often people get a document that says, post on LinkedIn, don't say this, do say this. And these are the three topics to talk about. I think it's more about the way that we're trying to empower executives and people within an organization instead of doing it yes or no. Um, but you've also experienced this, right? On a different level, on an editorial level. What have you found that works?
Well, on my end, let's say the personal branding part comes as like one component. For us, we're trying to get people to write long form content, which is yeah, it's it's not easy. And I think the reason why maybe you agree, and I'd be curious what LinkedIn said also because I know you met with them recently, but when we talk about doing some kind of company-wide personal branding, the thing is that I can't help but say to a client that we need to focus on understanding very well what are the regular behaviors of every thought leader we want to include. It's difficult to get somebody to understand that I'm going to go for quality over quantity. I'm not going to say, we need 10 or we need 15. I'm going to try to find as many as I can, but I'm going to triage them as well as I possibly can because I know that I ultimately need to build a personal relationship with this person to understand what process is most conducive for them to actually produce what I want them to produce. And so for somebody that's running, a very operationalized organization, it's difficult first of all to understand that this is operationalized, but in a very different sense of the word. And it's also difficult for them to understand, okay, how are you going to do something that is so personable at scale? And my answer to them is that it's not about scale in terms of how many people I can include. It's about if I do the first process like part right with each person, that person will produce more and more as time goes on. So my goal is to find them. My goal is to establish that relationship and figure out what process makes sense for them because it's possible that what works for one doesn't work for the other. One is inspired by some things, likes to write this way, likes to do. And I need to understand that I can't just make a template and give it to everybody. Not everybody is the same. I don't know if this approach is for everyone, but my approach is that if the client doesn't agree, then I don't stay.
It's very much like how I work. I can't create a strategy that applies to every individual. The way that I work with clients is not the same. I need to take, usually we take sort of like a month or two to do exactly what you've just said and understand how a client works, how they work with their team, who they are, do they write, do they not write, what kind of ideas do they have, what don't they have, and to understand how I can, get the most out of that, and work with them in the best way. It's not a one size fits all at all.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's more labor inducive. But as you said, the more time you put in at the beginning, the less time you need from them down the line,
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that this is the position that comms people should be taking. Okay, the reason why, and okay, it applies to probably everybody listening because if you're a comms consultant, then you're in a good spot because everybody, and like, let's talk about if everybody needs this because I feel like, you know, does our experience confirm the trends? Are people going more towards AI or more towards human generated content? Are people interested in personal branding more or are they interested in personal branding less? Are organizations stepping in or not? What do we say? What does LinkedIn say if you spoke with them? Like do we want to confirm or negate the rumors first of all?
Absolutely, absolutely confirm. LinkedIn are, let's just say, over the moon uh, at the developments that in this sort of the importance of human in what they do. And I didn't get into the details with him about AI, but
Dude, that would have been
not
my
the reason.
first question.
Yeah.
I would have been like, really? Are you sure? Because
No, I went into the meeting thinking I'm gonna listen as much as I can, and then I'm gonna speak. Um, no, they were talking about in the Netherlands anyway, because I spoke to the Benelux team. They were talking about how they've seen something like a 26% increase in the number of C-suite execs that are on LinkedIn in the last year, which for them is huge. That's a big number for them, and it's only increasing. And they wanted to speak to me because for them it's really interesting that there's people like me out there that are helping people do this. So they wanted to understand. They also wanted to understand from me, can we help you in any way? They had loads of thought leadership on data and insights and how people are using the platform. But what I did find interesting is that um, there's definitely a gap between execs and business owners
hmm,
in terms of, yeah, which was interesting on a sort of large organization level. So they were talking about Booking.com and what was the other company? Big companies, and how there were a lot more sort of C-suite execs working for larger organizations that were on LinkedIn than founders. And I mean, I see that in my work too, that there's definitely more of a trend of smaller D2C companies that have founders that are stepping forward online, and bigger organizations that are putting their, CEOs forward. So that was really interesting. Um, but I think the biggest takeaway from the whole thing was education. They said that is our biggest obstacle, is how can we educate people, um, so as to how to use the platform, but also how to communicate on the platform. And I said, well, that's also my biggest challenge. And that's, why I do what I do. They go as LinkedIn to big companies and conduct workshops, that kind of thing, which I'd never really thought about in that way, that as a platform, you also have a responsibility to educate. Not in terms of post between this time and that time, but writing. They're also, they want people to be writing. They are conducting writing workshops as LinkedIn. I was like, whoa, okay, amazing.
Hmm.
But I know that there are other aspects to that conversation, like the whole. I didn't ask you, but I should have asked about what happened to the tags that you have, the badges. The badges, and then the way you get a badge is that you filled in those AI generated questions, etc. But they've scrapped those, rightly so. I mean, they have a long way to go in terms of loads of other things, but um, it was nice to hear that they also value the creation aspect of the platform. They themselves, they said it's become more of a thought leadership platform. I thought, oh, okay, so they also using that term. But it was interesting to have a look inside the walls of a platform, and I think they're probably in the best position a social platform can be in at the moment. I mean, I wouldn't want to be on the other side of other platforms.
Sometimes you just fantasize a little bit about a day when LinkedIn goes like, you know what? We're just going to drop everything AI generated related and see what happens. I think they would just skyrocket if they did.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe it will happen. I don't know. They're constantly evolving, but they did say to me, they said we're just a bit late. We're just doing it a bit later than everyone else. It's taken us. We're slow and steady. That's what they told me. They said we're not the kind of people that are gonna, drastically change things quickly. Even just the vibe of being there was really, really nice. It didn't feel
Like a social
like
platform.
no. It didn't feel like no, no, absolutely not. It's obviously it's a corporate organization, and there is a certain vibe to it. But it was really nice to be there, and they were all really, you know, switched on, great people. So no, I'm a big LinkedIn fan. I've got to be. It's my it's my line of work. But I'm curious to see where we're gonna go in the next year or so with the platform. Um,
Okay, so that means the trends confirm that this is important. Okay, that puts everybody in a good, let's say, a good position. But again, I got to go back to the question of how do we bring out the human aspect when that human has an entire organizational brand behind them, big or small, personal or corporate, that they need to kind of, take care of. I've always tried to draw a line between like what the
mhm.
brand says and what I say, and try to, of course, the brands I have are infused with my values, most likely. But there are things, for example, that I would do that Branding Mag would not, or something like this.
Yeah.
So I try to create that balance. But how do you approach that? Because we know it needs to be authentic, which is one of people's favorite words, but it also needs to be effective for the company. So what does that look
Yeah,
like?
I've never really thought about it from your perspective. Of course, that it's also that way for you, with Branding Mag. But I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. Um, you can't forget when you're building a personal brand, there's an individual involved, and not every individual has the same values as everything a brand does. Um,
Mm,
so I think, well, in the balance of the content that you're creating, you need to take that into account. I need to not forget that sometimes people would, they really want to hear from me. And so I know that's really hard for some people to create that mental switch, but it's so important to keep your own vision alive in what you do and how you work. Actually, I had a conversation with a journalist about this. I said to her, I was talking to her about LinkedIn. I said, "Do you use LinkedIn?" She said, "Well, no, because I actually feel like it can influence the way that people read my pieces." And I'd never thought about it that way. She said, I feel like as a journalist, I need to be Switzerland. And she said, I'm worried that if I share too much of myself, that the sort of bias will seep through and people will read my content in a different way if they understand more about me and how my brain works. I thought, oh, I've also never thought about that from a journalist perspective. That there has to be a certain neutrality in what you do and how you write. Um, I didn't agree with it, but I'd never thought about a journalist thinking that way.
It's a sensitive subject, this one, with neutrality or not, really, because I feel like people like to think in extremes. So they either think, okay, I have to be Switzerland, and therefore I say nothing. Or if I go into a personal brand, or if I go into thought leadership, or if I go into these things, and that means that I have to have like a very strong opinion, and engagement comes only from very strong emotions. Therefore, I need to be facetious. I need to be a little bit combative. And people end up making these very crude, one directional statements, like, thought leadership is dead, or I don't know, these kind of
Yeah,
these kinds of and I'm sure that the executives that are watching, because given given the amount of people that use LinkedIn, the percentage of lurkers is high. Yeah, people that don't engage, don't do anything, they just watch. So I'm sure they're sitting there also in their organizations, if they work with comms folks, which they do, they're sitting there discussing this platform, and what's going on. And imagine the ones of us that, let's say, are a little bit more rational, I think a little bit more long term, maybe would provide a better education. We're sitting there worrying about like if we should be quiet or not,
yeah,
while the
yeah.
rest kind of misguide everyone that's watching. And I don't, for the journalist, I can kind of understand where she's coming from, but honestly, that's also what will make her maybe a little bit more interchangeable. It sounds a little bit like, she wants to be everybody's cup of
Anonymous.
tea.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
you can't. Actually, one of the rules is that the moment you start having, haters and trolls, that probably means you've gotten somewhere. When that comes in, that means that means you've reached more of the spectrum of possibility, which by definition means that you've expanded your
yeah.
role in some way. So, but see, this is interesting because it's not like our conversations with executives are any different.
No,
I talked to a
no,
law
and
firm also once.
yeah,
It's true. And I was like, "You guys are in
yeah,
the best position." I was like, "Your entire organization is made of personal brands. Like, why would somebody choose you over somebody else?" There you go a lot into approach, which is the beauty of it maybe, because it would be like, "Okay, we're all treating the same law, but the way
mhm,
we treat it is different. So how does that come out?" It's a good
yeah,
metaphor for thought leadership in
yeah,
general. I was thinking about it, and I was like, this is an interesting, case to crack. No
yeah,
pun
100%.
intended,
But you would then
but
be thinking less about open platforms like LinkedIn and more about, or would LinkedIn be part of the strategy?
I think LinkedIn could be part of the strategy because what's the thing with the law? The thing with the law is that nobody wants to read it. So I think everybody probably has their own way of summarizing, explaining, stating what's important. You have the same three lawyers look at the same law, and I don't know if they would all choose the same points as being the most important or the key, or I don't know. There's probably also some level of forecasting or predictions that can be made based on their experience about what might be coming. I think there's space. But yeah, in these cases, you end up going into the smaller communities, which is also cool to build a strategy around small. It's similar to engineers as well. It's an interesting concept. But, I mentioned thought leadership now, and I want to talk a little bit about what that means.
Hmm.
Because let's say people suppose that they know what it means, or they have some kind of feeling towards the term already, even though they haven't had a lot of, time to relate to it? How do you define it?
I think I find it more of an issue, the term itself, than that it helps. It scares a lot of people off.
Hmm.
People's immediate reaction is, "Oh, but I don't want to say that I know everything." To embody this all-knowing expert, but to me, that's not thought leadership. Thought leadership is being able to share your own experiences and the how of how you do something, um, to provide value, to inspire others to think differently. And that doesn't mean that you need to be the best and to know it all, but you do need to be able to tap into your own story and find the confidence in it. And I think for a lot of people, that's the whole other story. But that I do think the term puts a lot of people off. I wonder if it was called something else, like
Editorial marketing.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
that people would be a lot more. And I
or
don't think,
personal branding. That's
oh,
also
but
another
yeah,
one.
but it also has connotations of um making yourself look a certain way when you are that way. I think a lot of people associate it with branding, as in branding, simple branding, visual identity, and putting yourself out there in a way that's not really you, or putting a facade over who you are, adding a different color, or, you know, uh, uh, filming yourself in a way that's, not doesn't align with who you are. And that also, I think that for a lot of people, they think, oh yeah, but I don't want to brand myself. But that's not what personal branding is. Again, similar to thought leadership. I do have issues with both terms. Um, I've
Mhm.
seen other people avoid personal branding as a term, other companies as well, and they have called it authority building. I saw one company that just didn't mention it at all and talked about influence as the sort of, let's call it the currency that they were dealing in is influence, which yeah, I mean, that feels like we're going back to 2010, influencer marketing. Um, but yeah, words are loaded.
But you see, it's interesting that you say the influence word, because one of the ways that has been most useful for me to convince potential thought leaders to join is by telling them, those people that you care about, like the people that you work with or the people that you serve, or, I go a little bit into purpose and why do you do what you do and things like this. And I try to reach the point where I can say, all those people that you want to impact, they're getting their information from somewhere. And the examples that I can show you right now, and I always come loaded with examples, are probably things that you don't fully agree with or can be done better. I try to tap into this feeling of, you know, the space needs to be taken by someone. Let it be someone
Mm,
that's good like you are, that wants to help, that is true to the purpose. And if I maybe combine that with the fact that like the organization has chosen you, they slowly thaw a little bit, some faster than others.
I love
But
that. I used to start the process of building a personal brand strategy by asking people to ask their immediate friends and family and coworkers 6 questions about who they are. It sounds really simple, but it was also a great way to hold up a mirror to someone and to say, why do what you do? And what drives you? And all these people around you, they're saying these things about, you know, the feeling you give them and perhaps what they don't like about you, what they do like about you. But it was always a really simple way to get to the core of why someone does what they do. I think this is something that a lot of people on LinkedIn, they're obsessed with virality and the number of likes instead of building something you know that is qualitative to you and what you want to achieve. I help people build their businesses through building their voice in a sustainable way. And I intend for this to sort of live on beyond the working relationship that we have together, whether that's 6 months, a year, 3 years. The legacy that I want to leave behind is that they feel confident to continue that. So that, yeah, there is education involved. So we have that intake session. We film everything throughout the whole process. We film, we record everything. That's so important when you're trying to understand who someone is and tone of voice, nuances, and also just, make sure that you get everything and every detail. So we record everything, and then we develop a personal brand strategy. And I've actually changed the name of that. It was called a strategy, but I've started to call it a plan because there is something about the strategy that often leaves a sort of feeling of I've created something that's actually not actionable. Because great that, I've written someone's mission and vision and purpose and positioning and content pillars and, a strategic document. Great that I have that. But what are we going to do after that? So I've extended it into a plan, so that it feels actionable and that it is actionable and that we can say, okay, we start here. These are the KPIs. This is where we're headed. And then, as I said, the first 2 months are really important. That's when you really get to know a client and when you have to take the time to understand someone. So we conduct content interviews. Actually, one of the most important things in the job that I do is asking the right questions and making sure you get the right answers.
Amen.
And then we go for it and we test and we listen and we read and we iterate and we collect. And I think one of the most important things about personal branding is that you see it as a living, breathing entity, that it's not something that you, as I said, create on a piece of paper that you bring to life and that it stays that way. You have to adapt. There are a lot of people that are like afraid to, for example, change their headline on LinkedIn, which is so strange to me that I'm like, oh, people have like headline anxiety. Why not? Why not change it? Change it. See what works. Maybe it, increases the visibility of your profile by using specific keyword. Maybe it speaks to a different audience that you've been struggling to reach. Test things, try it out. Don't be afraid to, maybe a format that you've seen other people use and is, tried and tested and true, and do something different. Try something else. Um, Now, I'd love to see sort of a bit more, people taking a bit more creative license, and that's also my role in what I do is coming up with these ideas and helping people take risks, see what works, see what doesn't.
Do you have a significant number of clients that write for themselves? Or how
No,
much of the writing is theirs? Or how do you even foster them to actually write? Because you and I are both really big fans of writing. We
yeah,
believe in that process. And so, do you take it upon yourself to get them to write more? And
yes.
does it work?
I know that writing, if you tell someone a story, if you tell someone an idea, it sort of comes out the way that it's programmed in your brain. It's sort of one, two, three. If you sit down and if you think about the idea, if you take the time to actually, find the words to express yourself, you come out with something completely different than if you told someone. It's just the way it works. You think about why you know something and how you got there. And then once you have written something, you think, oh, yeah, maybe, you come up with another idea. The process of writing is so important in understanding how you think about certain things, but also getting you to the next step. So I have had to bake in quite a few roles into our work processes. It doesn't work with everyone because not everyone can sit down behind a laptop and write. But I've tried to minimize the use of voice notes in a collaboration with a client. So if they send a voice note or they say, "Can I call you about something?" I will say, Can you send me an email with it written out?" 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a full bodied idea and then some. You'll get something that's, fantastic. That you think, oh, yes, great. I don't need anything else. Um, so that, and I have tried to create a sort of shared space, if they don't already have that, because a lot of people do use Notion or they use other tools, other writing tools, for this sort of day-to-day planning, that we have a shared idea dump document, that's super low threshold, easy to use, that people can add to their phone, to their bookmarks, where they feel comfortable to sort of to write in. That it doesn't have to be in full sentences or in full, you know, a fully fledged idea, but that they feel like it's a place where they can write ideas. And that's changed the game for a lot of the people that I work with. I see that they needed that. some people I know, they have like beautiful Notion boards with a sort of idea dashboard, and I'm jealous of that. I just write wherever I can, wherever I can find an empty piece
Wherever there's space.
whether it's space, exactly, whether it's in notes or on my 5 notebook. But I do think that's so important. I think also for the work that you do as well, to try and keep that alive and to help people see the value that it creates. If you just take the time to sit and write, doesn't have to be with a pencil.
Yeah. My experience with journaling has been similar to my experience with Uggs. And this is gonna make absolutely no sense. But when I was growing up and I was in California and I saw, these girls that were coming to high school with like Uggs and jean
Oh
shorts,
my
I was like,
god.
I'm never wearing these shoes, even if somebody pays me. I just had such a bad perception about Uggs. And then one time when I was living in a very cold place, my mother brought me a pair, having forgotten evidently about my absolute distaste for this brand. She brought me a pair, and out of necessity, I started wearing these Uggs around the house. And I was like, damn, these shoes are good, you know? And I've had a similar experience with journaling. I was like, what is
Mhm.
this journaling thing? Everybody's talking about journaling. Everybody's talking about, oh, I do this stuff in the morning, then I do this, and then I do that. And then, you know me, I'm always like with the self help stuff, it has to be really good before I question a lot. And with journaling, it's been exactly like with the Uggs. At one point, I had somebody that I mega, mega trust give me this challenge of writing every night, no matter how small, no matter how tired, no matter how just right. And not like, dear diary, today I wore my favorite shirt, but, real observations about how I reacted to things, how I, these kinds of reflections. And I haven't missed a day since. And I've been telling everybody to do this. And actually, some of the people that I work with that have tried it write every day now for the same reason. And so I realized, man, this is good.
There's something to this. Yeah, I bought a book. The book that you told me I needed to buy? Waiting for me on the table. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I have yet to begin, but I need to, the copy of
I
what
forget the name of this book every
yeah,
time. When I
it's
told you, I also forget.
strange.
Create your power or something like this.
Something,
Anyways,
yeah, something like that.
something with power by
Yeah.
Maston Kip, for whoever's listening, is like a
Masking Kip,
40-day
yeah.
journey that will just blow your mind if you do it
It
correctly.
involves
It
writing.
but it
It
involves
involves
writing
writing. Yeah.
a lot. And I'm glad that there are more and more people that are realizing this. That's what's nice. When AI came along and everything was kind of like slipping into one direction, I'm like, well, the universe is all about balance. So I'm just patiently waiting for the moment when the
For
other
the other
side is going
side.
to really skyrocket. And I feel like it's happening. And
I feel it too, and I feel the more and more people are speaking out about it. I read so much more about people saying, "Let's stop with the whole one-line, post structure on LinkedIn. What happened to
yeah,
paragraphs, and what happened to long form? Like, let's just people wanna read. Like, I wanna read. I
yeah,
don't need to read a what you used to what was it called? Broetry."
yeah. It's an interesting moment. I think I have just one other thing that I think a lot of people will ask about. And you mentioned
Mhm.
it just a tiny bit earlier, but
Yeah.
is it possible to measure thought leadership?
Yeah, that's the golden question.
Like, okay, we convince people, that it's the right way to go. They jump in.
Yeah.
We maintain their engagement somehow. They're happy for themselves, but there's still a scope, which in my case tends to be quite company wide and large, that people are going to ask,
Yeah.
what is the
What is the
success of this?
ROI?
Also because, yeah, but also because it's not like this stuff is cheap. We're in a very delicate situation because the work that we do is very intensive. It requires a lot of, you know, personal stuff.
Human
Yeah.
personal effort, yeah.
So when finance comes knocking at the door and they sit there and they see the cost, they have questions, and you need to be able to answer those questions.
Yeah, there are the metrics like likes and then reposts and shares, but what does that actually say? That's what we need to be asking ourselves, and also what we need to be documenting. And it's right now, it's a lot of uh, handwork and a lot of, and it's tedious. But I think we need to be moving to an industry in which we stop asking ourselves how many likes did something get and start talking about, are we influencing points of view? Are we, what kind of impact are we making? I spoke to someone the other day about community, and community is a bit of a buzzword at the moment in the social space. Um, and they were talking about how important it's going to be to be able to measure community as a brand. And
Hmm.
that also really spoke to me. I thought, oh yeah, so it's not just in terms of follow account. Brands are going to start looking at, what is the sentiment of a community and how close knit are they, and what happens after someone sees something that you post. Are you driving real behavior change? Um, these are the kind of things I would love to, and I will pursue measuring in what we do. It's not easy, but I do think we need to be moving towards a landscape in which we're talking about how we're impacting perceptions and shifts. If we're talking about thought leadership, what percent of conversations include your point of view after you've
Mm.
shared it? Are you leading narratives or are you just following them?
As a preemptive way of tackling this, I document the good moments. I ask the thought leaders, I'm like, did anybody say anything to you recently? Like,
Yes.
did anybody tell me what you're hearing? I've literally gone into discussions where I'm expected to present analytics and I don't present analytics. I try telling them, like, thought leadership is a mindset. Do you know how to measure a mindset? Not so much, but I can tell you what's been going on. And you can tell me if any of the other things that we're doing are giving you as clear of signals as this is. And I know what to ask the thought leaders because by creating thought leadership myself or putting myself in their shoes by also building a personal brand, and that's why it was so important. And I think it's important for both of us, is because we see how other people react to us. So we say,
Mhm.
okay, so people generally, when they really like something that I've done, they reach out this way, or they do this, or they do that. So then when I go to the thought leader, I ask specifically, like, has this happened to you? Has anybody done this? And I literally take my personal experience and see if they've had the same. And I try to find like exemplary moments of success rather than sitting there and thinking about metrics. Just the other day, somebody was asking me, okay, the case was for YouTube, and they were saying, okay, but what is the most important metric you would look at if we were doing a podcast on YouTube? And I was like, how long people stay? Like,
Mhm.
what kind of question is
Watch
this?
time. Yeah.
Like, is your content
Yeah.
good enough for people to stick around and give their time and energy
Yeah.
and attention to it? Like, is it solid or is it not? They were saying, "No, it's the number." They wanted to say that it was the number of comments and conversations that would be had, and I'm like, "There are so many people that will love your content and never say anything."
And sorry, but how many of
So
those comments are AI generated? There's also the
mm,
quality of the comments. Yeah. But you know what I do think is a great metric, which I think everyone should take into account, and I know that you're also a big fan of it, is saves. If someone saves
I
your
love
content,
that.
and I don't mean like a
Yeah.
literally, obviously on LinkedIn, you can say something. I also don't understand why that's not visible yet. That to me is a great indication of content that's done what it's supposed to do. If someone is taking the time to save it and go back to it, then you've done something right.
But to your point about LinkedIn from earlier, one thing that they did get right is speaking of lurkers, they did introduce that dwell time metric where you kind of see how long people spend on a post without actually interacting with it. I kind of like you understood, behavior on the platform and you're trying to, you know, I take your opinion to heart and I'll give LinkedIn a little bit more of a chance to revamp their perception. Is there something because you have so much experience with this platform? Are there like commonly accepted best practices on LinkedIn that you found really don't make any sense?
Um, yeah, that whole conversation about video that everyone's having at the moment. Video, you gotta go video. Everyone's gonna be making videos. And in general, that we see in our results too, videos don't perform as well as written content, um, and carousels specifically. So that's just not true. That video is gonna perform better than other. I think if you've got a great video, sure. But I was also afraid, like when I remember in the first few weeks of the that they introduced that like TikTok style feed in the middle of your homepage, that I was worried that we were going to end up sort of going back down the short video route. That I thought, no, they're not going to, exactly what you said about the dwell time. I was thinking, no, are we going to go back to like the shorter the dwell time, the better, that we have like short video is going to be the way to go on LinkedIn. Thankfully, that's not the case, because dwell time is what it is. And, the longer people watch your video, the better it is for you in general. I went to an event yesterday and they were talking about, which is really interesting. They were talking about TikTok. So they were a TikTok specialist and they were talking about visual hooks in a video. So that's like, the first 0.2 seconds and what you see. And then some people say now, if you do something crazy or if you, if you like knock something out of the way, then it grabs your attention. And so many people have written best practices and are posting other videos about, these are the 10 visual hooks you should use to, have a viral TikTok. He said people are now recognizing the visual hook and then scrolling past. So the visual hooks that everyone is saying worked, don't work. But I think that is exactly the same conversation that we should be having about LinkedIn. That everyone knows, we've seen it. We've seen the templates that everyone uses. We've seen the carousels. We've seen the infographics. People are going to get sick of them. So people want to be surprised. I think we need to stop thinking in same as TikTok, in these are the things that work, and start thinking what are the things that are going to engage people on a different level or make them want to save my post to come back later. But at the beginning, when I started doing this a few years ago, I was so focused on, doing it by the book. And I've realized that the nuance in what I do is creating strategies for people that align with who they are and what makes them different, and helping bring that to life online. I don't agree with this best practice culture that we have. It's such a shame. It's crushing a lot of what makes things exciting and real and interesting.
Well, we definitely agree on that. And I think it's a nice
Mhm.
place to stop, because I think that's what we're probably all here to do to some extent. Whoever's listening could have only possibly arrived here if they have some kind of similar desire to break the mold and stick to what's more real, what's more true, let's say, and what's more creative in the end. So I really appreciate you coming on here today and staying
Thank
much
you for
longer than
having me.
expected.
Oh, time flies. Time flies when you're having fun. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone for listening. And it's been a pleasure.